I think it's fair to say that Just for Laughs is one of the most famous arts institutions in this country. We take pride in Just for Laughs being Canadian, and we should. Yesterday, we learned that the organization is in financial trouble. This year's festival is canceled. Today on the podcast, the uncertain future of Just for Laughs. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Just for Laughs is one of the biggest comedy festivals in the world, but it's in trouble. Yesterday, the Montreal company that operates the festival canceled the 2024 season, and then it said it's seeking creditor protection, and 75 people were laid off, according to a festival spokesperson. Now, that future appears a little bit uncertain. So, what happened there? How did this comedy institution, a place credited with giving everyone from Ray Romano to Kevin Hart their big break, find itself on the brink of bankruptcy? T'Cha Dunlevy of the Montreal Gazette is here. T'Cha, hello, pal. How's it going?
Well, I mean, it's going all right, but definitely a big news day, or it was yesterday, and a kind of shocking development in Montreal.
Right? Like, it's a huge story. Okay, let's talk about this. What went through your mind when you heard the news about Just for Laughs?
I mean, I think the whole city was in shock. I mean, there were hints last week. There were hints. We knew that, or we learned that the festival was in a certain amount of financial trouble. But to go from that to this year's festival is canceled, we're declaring or starting bankruptcy protection is a huge jump. And this festival's been around for 40 years, since 1983. It's, one of the biggest festivals, comedy festivals, if not the biggest in the world, both on the, international side, all the big stars who have come, but also the Quebec side has really created a whole community and a lot of comedy stars in Quebec.
I mean, okay, I take seriously the thing that you just said, the idea that the whole city is in shock, because when an institution this big, announces that it's in trouble, everyone kind of looks around and says, "What happened here? How did we get here?" So, for those people who are not as familiar with the festival, let's talk a little bit about its cultural significance and why this is such shocking news.
Okay, well, I mean, Montreal kind of dubs itself quite proudly the city of festivals. Like we have festivals for everything all the time, year round.
Yeah.
The biggest, let's say the top three festivals we have are the Montreal Jazz Festival, for one, like the biggest jazz fest in the world. And then we have the Comedy Festival, number two, or, you can switch those numbers 1 and 2, but the biggest comedy festival in the world, like everybody has played, like Seinfeld, Amy Schumer, Kevin Hart, Ali Wong, Jim Carrey,
they all start here. Yeah.
Yeah, they got their breaks here, and then there's a lot of networking that's done at the festival. So a lot of deals are made, people meet other people, and then on top of that, on the Quebec side, on the French Quebecois side, there's a whole Quebecois comedy scene. So they have Juste pour rire in French, and then they have Just for Laughs in English. It's actually like two festivals joined as one. So there's a whole Quebecois festival that goes with it, and it's created a Quebec comedy scene and stars out of that as well. So that's the kind of really homegrown part on top of the international part.
I think what you've done is illustrated, a really beautiful picture of just how significant the festival is in the city. But look, this is not just a Montreal story. JFL is a huge festival in Toronto as well. And there's something about how significant a role Just for Laughs has played in terms of promoting Quebec comedians. Let's talk a little bit about the feeling in the community. What is the feeling in the community right now watching this unfold?
Well, just to jump back to one thing, in terms of the Toronto Festival, there's different ownership there. And just so Toronto people know, their festival is safe for now. Yes. That's untouched.
The for now sounded foreboding. I appreciated it, but yes. Yeah.
And in Quebec, though, I mean, I think to continue what I was saying before about all the Quebec stars, and there's Quebec has its own culture and community in French, like in the Quebecois side. And there are all these stars who have made their names, Juste pour rire. It's the event of the year. And then on top of it, the festival produces tours and shows throughout the year by these comedians. So this is like a huge institution, and they're kind of their bread and butter. And when it declares or starts the process to declare bankruptcy and cancels the show and cancels its festival, I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about their future and how they function when the main engine driving comedy in Quebec is shutting down, at least for this year.
It's also like the abrupt nature of this, right? Because
absolutely,
as you said, like maybe there were some rumblings a little bit earlier last week, but before that, kind of nothing, right? Like comedians had already been accepted into this year's festivals. They were already plotting their shows anyway. So there was a lot of business as normal before the announcement yesterday.
Absolutely, and I mean, things were starting to be booked. There were seven shows that were canceled. Like they were all Quebec shows that had been canceled, but these shows had been lined up already.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it came out of nowhere, and we went from like 0 to 100 basically. Those 7 shows, interestingly, those several of the Quebec comedians that were booked through the festival and the shows were canceled. They have since announced almost immediately that they will hold their shows anyway, and they will self-produce their shows because the shows will continue.
Okay, so what's the explanation that we're getting from Just for Laughs as to why this is happening right now?
Well, this is kind of interesting, right? Because the festival itself is saying, oh, it's the pandemic. I mean, but, everybody in the world experienced the pandemic. But they said it was the pandemic. They said it was inflation, the changing cultural landscape, right? Those are nice words, but they don't really get to like something that everyone else isn't experiencing.
Yes.
A French columnist in Quebec in La Presse, Marc Cassivy, today had a column talking about the elephant in the room, and it's anybody who knows the festival will think of this, and it's that the festival founder Gilbert Rozon in 2017, around the time of Me Too, faced multiple allegations of sexual misconduct and sexual assault, and it became a huge controversy. He ended up selling his shares in the company in 2018, and there's a civil lawsuit against him. He was in court. He wasn't found guilty, or he was found innocent, in 2020, but that doesn't stop the civil lawsuits against him. So the festival itself suffered a huge amount in terms of its credibility. Yeah. And I think that has really played a big part in this. I think that a lot of sponsors have pulled out or been very wary about the festival. And also when the head of the festival, the face of the festival, steps down after 40 years or 35 years, it changes things, and the identity of the festival changes. So I think the festival has had a lot of trouble recalibrating with new ownership coming in, and it's trying to find itself right now.
So we got about a minute left here. The group that organizes the festival has said its plans are to maintain operations, albeit at a scaled-down format, as organizers restructure the event. Once that restructuring is done, it hopes that the festival is going to come back in 2025. When you sort of look at this landscape and the story right now, what do you think that could look like?
Well, that's really tricky and hard to guess. I mean, you have to figure they're going for bankruptcy protection. They're going to have potentially new investors. They've asked for new investors to come in, or there could be new ownership. And due to the financial woes, that could either be a very conservative festival that is very careful about where it spends its monies, or it could be somebody that comes in with new ideas, new blood. Maybe there is a new ownership that comes in, and maybe they take it in a slightly new direction. It's not going to be the big behemoth that it has been so far. It's going to kind of have to scale back or start fresh in some way. But I think the festival is going to change. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I don't imagine we're anywhere near close to done with the story. In fact, I kind of think we might be at the very beginning of it. So we'll check it again. But T'Cha, thank you so much for your time, man. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. T'Cha Dunlevy is an arts reporter for the Montreal Gazette. Before we go, there's been so much reaction online to this story. I want to read a post by comedian and actor Mark Critch. He wrote, "Very sad to hear this news. Over the years, JFL has given me opportunities from performing stand-up to writing for the Muppets and John Oliver. From the top to the bottom, staff are hardworking and so respectful of talent. We shall rear again. Our colleagues at CBC News continue to follow the story. For the latest, cbcnews.ca." I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and you are listening to Commotion. When you step back and think about it, it is a strange thing that for 6 seasons now, we've been watching people fall in love through a wall.
This felt right all the time.
Yeah.
I remember, there's no way I'm going to end up getting married. There's no way I'm going to find my fiance on the other side without seeing her physically.
Yeah.
And AD, I shot myself in the mouth so many times, baby.
That is a little bit of the new season 6 of the Netflix series Love is Blind. Look, I remember the frenzy around Love is Blind season 1 when it first came out. It came out just as a pandemic was getting started. Everyone I knew was trapped in their houses watching this strange reality show from Netflix. The premise is that these people date each other without ever seeing the other person. They talk in these pods, and the only way that they meet is when they decide to get engaged. The show keeps calling itself an experiment. This season, that experiment has been making people so mad. We're here to talk about whether 6 seasons in, this experiment is even working. To unpack this, we got culture critics Amil, Niazi, and Kathryn VanArendonk here. Kathryn, Amil, what's up, y'all? How's it going?
Good. Psyched.
Always love to be here.
Yeah, especially when there's chaos involved, especially when there's chaos around Love is Blind involved. Kathryn, you've watched the entire season now. No spoilers, but we're going to try to get through this. Generally, what did you think of this season of Love is Blind?
I think this season was an interesting sort of swing back to a little bit more of a standard format for this franchise. Season 5 last year, which was set in Houston, was distinguished by a level of unprecedented drama between cast members. And so I do think this season, which, is set in North Carolina, is a little bit more of a return to form for this show. But that said, return to form still means that there's a lot of unexpected things that happen, that there are these big moments between people that everyone wants to be able to predict. I think one of the things that I have noticed with this season, it feels like it has been increasing since the first season, actually, is that there's just an unending amount of chatter about it. It does feel increasingly like monoculture is gone, except maybe for Love is Blind.
Every time that Love is Blind returns, people are like, yeah, let's talk about this show. I appreciate that you're saying that there's less drama on this season somehow. This is a season where multiple people have been found to have been in relationships before they got into the show. And you're like, yeah, but you know what? Less dramatic than last season. There's been plenty of drama on screen with moments like this one.
Oh my goodness. If you're fishing for me to tell you that I text my girlfriends all the time.
I see.
If you want to sign up with me, you have to sign up for all my friends too.
It's a respect thing, babe. It's a respect.
I'll take a step back from hanging out with girlfriends if that's what you want.
But
you haven't asked me.
Yes, I have, but you apparently haven't listened.
When? Tell me right now. Do you want me to take a step back?
Of course I do, and I told you that.
I'm not willing to take a step back.
God, I love that moment so much.
Okay, so that's a first of all, an incredible fight. That's a fight between Jimmy and Chelsea. There's been reports that some of the other contestants were in some relationships while they were auditioning or filming the show. They've denied these accusations. Amil, what did you think of the casting this time around?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could just talk about Jimmy and Chelsea for an hour.
Go off.
But I'm respectful of our time here. I think the issue with the casting is an issue that's actually kind of prevalent across the reality TV landscape, which is that you have people who are acutely aware of how the show works, how best to come across. Yeah. They understand that it creates a kind of like its own ecosystem,
its own sort of moral
fame.
Code, right? Sure.
But afterwards, you can go into the influencer racket. Yeah. You can get all these different deals. There's D-level, C-level deals, but it still allows you an entry into a kind of a different world. Sure. You see it on Salt Lake City. You have a Monica who's the newest housewife. She's obviously a fan of the show. Yeah. And I think as viewers, we want a little bit of suspension of disbelief that the people on the shows are acting, that there's artifice there. We want them to be real and vulnerable. And I think that what we're seeing with the casting of Love is Blind this season and all of this stuff coming out about how they were in relationships and they were presenting a certain persona for the show is that it makes us feel cynical about the whole experiment. Yeah. And then I think it fails on that front completely.
So you're saying they're not here for the right reasons.
Exactly. Exactly, Elamin.
Okay, the show first dropped in February 2020, and he was billed to this experiment. Nick Lachey could not stop saying the word experiment on the show. There was a sense of sincerity there. I think there was a sense of these people are genuinely hoping to find love here. Mm-hmm. Amber and Barnett did. I don't know why. Cameron and Lauren found love in first season. When you sort of look at the arc of the show, 6 seasons in 4 years, how would you say this show has evolved since the first season?
I think the first season was such a hit because it's so difficult to have novelty in reality TV these days. Like there are so many different kinds of formats, but we have a real understanding of how this thing works by now. And when Love is Blind came out, it just felt so different. It was like, they're not going to even see each other. They're in these pods. Everyone involved genuinely seemed kind of like new to reality TV and new to this idea. And I think it felt very fresh. And then, like I said, it's evolved in a way where now people understand how the show works. We've seen some people get influencing deals. Lauren and Cameron basically quit their jobs to influence full time.
Full-time influencers, yes.
And so you have people coming into it now who completely understand how the format works, and they're sort of manipulating it and using it, and it now feels much like The Bachelor or Housewives. It feels part of that universe as opposed to something fresh and exciting and new.
That sounds sad to me.
It is sad. It is kind of sad.
But I guess every show has to kind of grow up, Kathryn. Like every show has to kind of become established. You're a bit familiar with the format. What's your sense of how the show has evolved since the first season?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Amil is saying is correct in the sense that, like any reality show, once it's been around for several seasons, the players start analyzing the game. They understand how it works. They understand what buttons to push. I do think there's an important distinction between Love is Blind and something like Housewives, though, where the ideal housewife is a multi-season deal. They are cast members who are going to return. They are potentially, like the big successful ones, become their own executive producers, or they have a lot more stake in the seasons that they're making. And Love is Blind is closer to, Bachelor even is a little bit different, but Love is Blind is closer to a sort of one-season anthology model where you're actually filming for a very short period of time. Like you're really only filming for 6 weeks at the most.
Yeah.
And you don't have to take off more than 2 weeks of work. And so it makes it possible for people who are not, like, part of the problem with Bachelor casting is that they are gone for 3 months of a time in order, really only influencers can do it. And so there is this element of Love is Blind that is still able to pull in some people who are not that, which I do think is partly why the show continues to have appeal.
Although we see people like Micah and Bartise, they've become sort of characters in that world, and they are coming back, and they're sort of doing like an all-stars thing. So it just the cynicism for me is hard to escape with a show like this.
But they can't predict when they're going to become those characters. Like neither Micah or Bartise could enter into that world with any kind of certainty that it was actually going to work for them, which I do think is fascinating.
But okay, so I'm glad that you guys are using specific names of specific people, because this is a kind of ecosystem that ends up creating some of these stars, and then you end up kind of remembering them for an extended period of time. Do you want to talk about Chelsea? Do you want to take this moment to talk about Chelsea? Because you seem to be like really interested in her as a character. Why is she revealing to you, do you think?
I mean, obviously she's become a lightning rod. She's the unexpected villain of this season. And I think part of it is that, for me, Chelsea, when she was in the pods and even, in talking to Jimmy's friends and family, she's really sold herself as like having done a lot of work on herself. She's secure. She's confident. She used all of this therapy speak that we've been speaking about sort of culturally for a while.
She uses therapy speak in regular conversation. She's worked on it herself.
Exactly. She talks about being in therapy, and it's something I think we've all kind of understood, but it's so filtered through almost like a TikTok lens where, it's too perfect. And then so you have that language, and then you can see in real time how insecure she is, how much she's still struggling with self-confidence, how much work still needs to be done on herself. And to me, I think it just speaks so much to how that language has become so meaningless. And to me, that's why Chelsea's so fascinating. It's like we're just watching the living embodiment of how meaningless some of that therapy language has become. And it's hard to watch someone who's struggling so intensely find love when like, girl, you should still be in therapy, not on television.
Go ahead, Kathy. You look like you're about to say something.
I think Clay is the same situation. That's all my...
Well, so what I like about this is that, like, we're identifying like specific characters that are windows into what it's like to date right now, which is to say, is that the appeal of the show, Kathryn? The idea that you get hooked onto these characters that become windows into, you know what, if you're trying to date, you're going to meet a lot of these characters who are working on themselves, but maybe they're not quite actually working on themselves, who will present this certain facade, but you kind of go like, I don't know how to deal with this person in real life.
Yeah, I think absolutely that is a part of it, in the same way that like any reality show at any time is this. We are deeply fascinated by humans. Like, we want very much to know what is happening in other people's heads. Yeah. And the structure of a reality show requires that somebody does something and then later turns to a camera and says directly, this is what I was thinking about at that time. Now, whether or not that was actually true, like, that's also part of it. Like, were they actually thinking about it at that time? Were they playing it? The thing about dating right now that I also think is interesting relative to this show in particular is the appeal of Love is Blind for the participants, and they say it over and over and over again on the show, is actually they're there because they don't want to be in regular dating. They're there because they don't want to be on the apps. They're there because it has not been working for them. They are often able to rattle off long lists of like types of guys that they've fallen for before and want to avoid now. And the appeal of the show, the appeal of the whole pod thing, is that you escape the like fast swipe situation that people find themselves in before.
Well, I was going to say, you know, what's wild about the show is that it's also managed to adapt itself to a bunch of different contexts, and everyone feels different. We should talk about the other franchises, because Love is Blind Japan, Brazil, Sweden. There's an upcoming Middle Eastern adaptation, Love is Blind Habibi, which is, I have questions. Listen, how has this franchise managed to adapt to these different audiences, do you think, Kathryn?
So I think the international adaptations are more sort of extended versions of the same thing that we see actually in the United States version, which is that each city has its own weird flavor and like different types of people who end up sort of collecting. The Seattle group is very different than the Houston group, and they're very different than the Chicago group. And the much more exaggerated version of that is like, when you design this show to be in Japan, it's going to be very different than when you design this show to be in Brazil. And there's something really, really fascinating about watching what kinds of characteristics people who are in Japan say that they want in their mates versus the people in Brazil, people who are much more reserved. I was watching the Swedish one. They all look insanely hot to me, like all of them, like more than Brazil. They all just look, and yet the second they all get out of the pods on that season, they all look at each other and they go, I don't really see it. And I was like, what are you talking about? These are the hottest people on the planet. Like, it's fascinating.
Amil, maybe 30 seconds left to you here. This show has its fair shares of memes and Hall of Famers. Do you see it having the longevity that other reality dating shows have? Is this like the model now, do you think?
I don't see it. I actually didn't watch last season because I was sort of over it. It was no longer exciting or novel or interesting to me.
You're done with the experiment. Yeah. Okay.
I did get sucked back in because, like Kathryn said, we do have this like need to talk about it when it's on. So we'll see. I guess I can't imagine it going on longer, but hey, I got sucked back in this time around, so.
And Netflix will keep doing that to you. Amil Niazi, Kathryn VanArendonk, thank you so much for being here, you guys. You guys are the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Of course. Amil Niazi is a culture critic and columnist at The Cut. Kathryn VanArendonk is a TV critic at Vulture. My name is Elamin. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I will see you then.